Hello, Internet. I'm not quite sure which camera to be talking at right now because you guys don't have your tally lights on, but I'm Chase Jarvis, and I'm grateful for you guys coming here and paying attention to what's going on at Chase Jarvis Live. For those of you who are new to ChaseJarvis.live, I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, and I have been trying to bring things that are behind the scenes in photography and video to the internet in this kind of live setting, whether it's a photo shoot, behind the scenes filming, or most recently, and what this is a good example of, is that I'm trying to share with the world the things and the people that have inspired me along the way, and people that I think you guys would be interested in connecting with. We've got a lot of new viewers today from perhaps the hip-hop community, and Seattle in general, and much larger than Seattle, are paying attention to what it is that we're doing. And I have two guests that I'd like to introduce. One, kind of the subject of today's conversation, a good friend of mine, an amazing MC, RA Scion of Common Market, and his new project, which is what we're really here to talk about today, called Victor Shade. And then, boy, what do you say about this guy over here? Charles Mudede. He's a writer, filmmaker, and a cultural critic. And we thought we'd have kind of a roundtable discussion that is talking in and about music generally, hip-hop culture, and hip-hop music specifically, and how this relates to what it is that you're doing with your new project. I will invite people to send me questions from the old internets over the course of the next kind of hour. We're going to talk, then we're going to have a live performance for Raw. We're probably going to talk some more. And if you want to ping me, I'll be taking questions from the Twitter universe at #CJLive. Without further ado, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Can you start off, or can we start off by you telling the world, but actually tell us here at the table, specifically what's the genesis behind Victor Shade?
I don't have a prepared answer for you, so I'll do my best to wing it.
Sure.
The project, the Victor Shade project, was born out of two things. One is a relationship that I have with MTK, producer out of Everett. This guy's been working hard for several years, and over the course of the 2.5, 3 years that I've known him, I've collected more than 100 beats of his, with the intent of eventually using something somewhere. Never had a plan for it, but it was always on the back burner that he and I would do a full-length project together. So that's where the beats come from, anyway.
Got it. What about the concept?
The concept, what really drove the idea behind Victor Shade as it came to fruition, was the inspiration from my late brother-in-law, Jimmy. This is a topic that I've discussed and explored on Tobacco Road, Common Market albums, like The Winter's End. This topic of suicide is something that affects me pretty profoundly. I lost my father to suicide when I was very young, and then losing my brother-in-law to suicide as well provoked me to think about a whole lot of things, and to actually try and address the subject in an accessible manner. You know, it's difficult to talk about suicide. We don't do it at a societal level. It's taboo. It's very difficult to talk about suicide, I think, because of the Christian influence in the society. Because we automatically presume that if you take your own life, you go to hell. If you're raised in the church, that's how you're taught to believe. And I think that has a very profound influence on the way that our reluctance to talk about things like suicide. So it became a challenge for me to address the topic. Losing my father to suicide, losing my brother-in-law to suicide over the span of 30 years. They're both named Jimmy, which I thought was very interesting, because I had addressed my father's suicide in songs in the past and actually referred to him as Jimmy. I was 6 years old when I lost my dad, so we didn't have a relationship, you know, so he's always been Jimmy to me. So there's that as well. Before my brother-in-law passed away, he had assigned different superheroes to people in his life.
This is the part where I love it. It gets you.
This guy was heavy into comics. I mean, he lived in a Marvel universe. He really did. And before he had passed, he told me, "I'm the Vision." I had no idea what that meant, or if there was any real significance to it. Didn't think much about it because I don't have much familiarity with comics. with anything to do with comics. Really, I've never read comics. Don't really know much about the characters and the role that they play. Don't know anything about superpowers, but I have an appreciation for it. There is a inextricable connection between the comic universe and hip hop music and culture. You've seen it in Wu-Tang predominantly. People like Kool Keith or people like MF Doom. I mean, there's really a close link between these two cultures, but I'd never made the connection personally. Not until after losing Jimmy did I put some thought into it. Did I do some research and find out what it was that motivated him to even undertake this task of assigning different superheroes to his friends and family before he died. And I think he did that consciously. I think he told me what he needed to tell me before he left this world.
Doesn't the vision like save the world through words?
It's possible.
Yeah, I thought that's what some of the...
I still maintain my ignorance for the comic universe. I don't know much about it, but what I do know is that the Vision is essentially an android, which is unlike most superheroes, which are mutants, right? The Vision was created by Henry Pym. He has the heart of the Human Torch. He was created, I think, initially to fight the West Coast Avengers, and then ends up joining the West Coast Avengers. Now, this is where I started to make a real connection between me personally and this idea of a superhero, right? I'm born and raised in Kentucky, which identifies heavily in terms of hip-hop culture with East Coast hip-hop.
Sure.
So much so that when there was a split sometime around the very late 80s, early 90s, that East Coast, West Coast rivalry started to become more prominent, we heavily identified with East Coast music and hated West Coast music. So there you go. You automatically have the East Coast, West Coast rivalry. Maybe I was born to fight the West Coast Avengers. Lord knows that I had no idea that I would ever end up living on the West Coast. I knew nothing about Seattle.
There's a very, very rich emotional and culturally based significance to Victor Shade.
If you choose to read into it that way,
Sure.
of course, but that's the thing. That's the personal connection that I'm making.
Right.
And that's what motivated me to do this Victor Shade project. I'm not telling everybody, you know, I am a superhero and I'm struggling with this identity. I just want to be a regular guy. But that's the fictional product of what takes place in my head, right? That's what came out as Victor Shade. So I'll wrap it up by saying Victor Shade is the alter ego to the Vision.
Got it.
That's where Victor Shade comes from. That is, you know, Peter Parker to Spider-Man or Clark Kent to Superman. The alter ego, the real life regular guy.
Before I go over to Charles just for a second, that's one of the things that I find is so interesting. And like, for example, right here, we're sitting here, in a photographer, filmmaker form, we're bringing in cultural heroes. You've already brought in comics, you know, personal issues, East Coast, West Coast rivalry, all of that as information moves a lot quicker, all that is becoming more and more a part of the fabric of the art that is created, whether you're in New York, in Seattle, Tokyo, London, or wherever. And that's what is impressed most upon me with the era that we're living in right now, specifically the projects that you're working on, and Charles is amazing at uniting all of those things, from, you know, your films and your writing to your amazing knowledge of hip hop. When you guys are going to start talking about crazy hip hop stuff, I'm going to have to step out. I know superficially, but Charles, tell me a little bit about what your view on this and how. I mean, you've been, if I'm not mistaken, a huge fan of Roz ever since the first time you heard him.
Yeah, you know, first thing, you know, I always want to figure out how you approach this huge question called hip hop and the people involved in it, and when they make their art, what that art really means. In this, I mean, I go from the very small to the very large very quickly. I'm not scared of that. And so, when I think of just this comment about going from the East Coast to the West Coast, coming from Kentucky, the fact that, you know, Tobacco Road, which was Common Market's record released about 2 years ago now, very successful, a really huge project. I mean, it was not small. I mean, it was a real investigation of life in Kentucky. I mean, and what other forum allows that kind of flexibility, right? That you can go and talk about picking tobacco in Kentucky and be white, and it can be hip hop, right? And that to me is, I always say, well, what is hip hop then? Exactly. I mean, if it can just be so flexible, if it can go from here to there. I mean, right now, a few days ago, I was watching a movie called Imani. They have the Seattle Film Festival right now, and it's a long festival. It goes on for forever. And I watch too many films during it. But
Thank
there
you,
is
Carl and Deborah.
yeah. I love this. I mean, it's a great way to see the world. I mean, I hate to say it, because all these films you will never see them again. They won't get distribution. The film industry is being strangled right now by the financial crisis. So more than ever, it's your chance to really see stuff. And so you go to this. I went to SIFF and I watched a film called Imani, and it's set in Uganda in Kampala. And there was a rap, there was a break dancer in the film, and it involved dancing and hip hop in Kampala, and I was blown away. Here I am, and this, I call hip hop a technology, and they're using it right there, and they're translating their experiences, going between the rural and the urban, between the slums and the posh neighborhoods, the colonial legacy of that country, all being channeled through and processed in terms that are clearly hip hop. So this is, to me, whenever I encounter other rappers and I'm seeing they're doing a successful job at this processing, because that's what it is. I mean, can you process it well? Can you bring your culture? Can you bring your history, your situations, the tragedies in your life, right? And it's not, I don't care about anybody's tragedy when I'm listening to hip hop, to be honest with you. I really don't. I feel for people, but if that hip hop is not good, the tragedy does not make it a good hip hop. It just doesn't. And I'm sorry, a lot of people like to believe that you can just speak about something very deeply personal, but it has to be.
Sure. Tragedy in and of itself is not the mechanism by which
we all have tragedy. Who doesn't?
Right.
Who doesn't have dead people behind them? I mean, unless you're from the moon, right? I don't think you can come from the moon. But anyway, the thing is that the thing is that what RA has done so successfully, when I've noticed this from from his work with Sabzi. Which we're going to have to talk about pretty soon, but is that he's done a really excellent job at translating all of these experiences and his movements and his place in America into really good hip hop. Yeah, and it's that's how it goes. That's almost my statement.
That's a great artistic statement to come to the table with.
Yeah,
it sounds very prepared.
Yeah.
As a writer, I guess.
Coincidentally, there is one Baha'i temple on the entire continent of Africa, and it's in Kampala. I don't know whether they probably didn't cover that in the film, and it probably doesn't have any real relevance to the film itself. But again, when you start to make these connections, when you make a conscious effort to do so, to start connecting the dots for yourself, not to establish some global government conspiracy, but when you start to connect the dots for your own self, then you start to see these things and recognize and appreciate the importance, I think. And I mean, really, Africa is a very large continent. I lived in Zambia for 2 years, and oftentimes when I tell people I lived in Zambia, they say, "Oh, I know somebody who lives in in Botswana. Maybe you know them." The American perspective of Africa, many people believe Africa is a country, and they don't understand or appreciate the magnitude of the geographic impression of Africa. And again, one Baha'i temple on the entire continent, and it's in Kampala. So yes, there's hip hop there. There's also the Baha'i faith there.
Yes.
And both of those things are very important to me.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it takes a trip to Africa to realize how huge it is, and also how diverse it is. I mean, the Kampala to me is as foreign as, here this movie gave me an access to it, and I noticed similarities, but I had to see it. I have no idea what goes on in Kampala if nobody shows it to me. Just because I grew up in Harare doesn't mean I understand what's out in Kampala or Cairo or Lagos. I mean, they are as foreign to me as Fairbanks, Alaska, right? And people don't understand this is what you're dealing with, and then they lump this huge continent together, and then but then as I say, travel makes the difference. If you travel, you will see. You will see the facts, and you will change the way you see, the way you think about them.
Before living in Zambia, all I knew of the country was from the old Stetsasonic song. Do you remember this song?
Oh yes, AFRICA,
Angola, Soweto, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Zambia,
and
Mozambique, and Botswana. So let us speak about the motherland. Speak about the motherland. Yeah,
One of us does not know the lyrics.
You're talking about somebody who was what, maybe 13, maybe 14 years old when I was listening to Stetsasonic. That's all I knew of Zambia was from that song.
Yeah.
Didn't know a thing about the country.
Well,
10 years later, I was living there with a wife and a child. I mean,
well, this is.
you have to start making the connections,
Well,
right?
and speaking of connections, that's one of the things that's interesting for me personally as an artist is, I mean, look at what hip hop is, and you touched on it, Charles. It's this amazing amalgamation of so many parts of culture. There's African history, there's you mentioned East Coast, West Coast, there's the shallow history of hip hop and the recency, but it's obviously incredibly deep, and someone from outside of the industry, I have not come up through the hip hop industry, but can have such a deep appreciation for it. It can connect people in so many different ways. It's a versatile music.
Absolutely. What's also very impressive. I want to say this as sort of a last. I always like to move on beyond that point, but the stuff going on in Kampala, they're rapping in their local language. They're not rapping in English.
Sure, right.
It's happening also in Soweto. It's also happening in Tokyo. They rap in Japanese and French. The reason why hip hop is so popular and even supported is because they rap in French. They don't rap in.
It's beautiful.
Yes, it's beautiful, and it's keeping their language alive. So in a way, I mean, instead of complete absorption, so this is an incredible piece of cultural software because it doesn't seem to destroy what you're doing. It seems to accept it and allow you to mold it on the terms of your experience, right? Otherwise, you'd be rapping in English, right? I mean, if it was a complete takeover, you wouldn't be returning people or returning. The art wouldn't come back to us with completely new possibilities, such as another language, other registers, other rhythms, and so on and so on.
It's very much like an open source language technology.
Absolutely.
Where everyone's adding to it and dividing it and sharing it and remixing it and remaking it. I haven't thought of it as software before, technology. It's brilliant.
That's always been my opinion. It's a piece of cultural technology that you can share and you can use, and it's open to everybody, right? And look what's happened. And look how well it's spread. So I mean, it's always a model for business for me, or not for an economy.
Sure.
An economy of open software.
Brilliant.
So.
Culturally, I think it does still require some form of assimilation or at least adaptation, right? I mean, sure, I think hip-hop makes hip-hop as a culture, hip-hop as a genre of music, however you choose to define it. Yes, the path is wide enough to accommodate all, right? It is. You could bring anything that you want to the art form, or to the culture, and you're encouraged to do so. But at the point where you start utilizing the art form to express yourself, there are some standards, right?
Okay.
And that gets back to the very first point that you made.
Right.
It's got to be good.
Yep.
It really does have to be good.
Yes, that's right.
And globally, I think we're still trying to advance to that level. Where globally people are making good hip hop music, and it's circulating. And certainly the internet is going to be such a valuable tool, not only for distribution of music, but even for the creation of music. If people are able to download the software. I mean, hardware is one issue, but that's becoming more and more available.
Sure, it's not been fully democratized, but it's en route.
Access.
Right.
People are having more and more access to the hardware necessary to create music, right? And then with the ability to download software, some of it free, some of it illegal, however it happens, accessibility.
Yeah, well, most of it's going to live up here in the not too distant future, and people are just going to use little teeny devices to plug into it. So
sure, people are already shooting videos with the camera phones and whatnot, and they come out looking not so bad.
Yeah, who did that in Seattle?
Dime Def.
Dime Def did it walking down Pike.
Yeah, and it was brilliant. It was
Yes,
beautiful.
it was
well done.
You guys remember the songs for eating, drinking, hip hop thing that we had here?
Yes,
where,
that's right.
Where basically it was a gathering for the folks at home. It was a gathering of Seattle's hip hop community. I think, Charles, you call it the most important night in hip hop history in Seattle. I think something like that.
Yeah, well, because there were just one of my things was that if you dropped a bomb that night, you'd pretty much have
Wiped out.
Eradicated Seattle.
hip hop. It would.
But the thing that struck me was that MCs were writing rhymes on their phones while others were standing up and delivering rhyme a cappella, you know?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that was incredible.
That's that cultural adaptation that you're seeing.
Right.
That's just straight mimicry, is what that is, really. I mean, there's a certain functionality to actually writing your raps on your BlackBerry, but come on, I mean, a lot of it is for effect.
Sure.
You know, you stand up and deliver the rhyme from your BlackBerry. I mean, come on.
Well, you know, I mean, here's something that I always think about a little bit, is that you can always, is that I'm impressed that even to this day, I mean, hip hop's been around for 30 years, and it's the way it starts and the tools it uses, the procedures are such that they're still useful. They still make sense with all the technological changes that have happened in 30 years. And that to me is quite impressive. I mean, right now, a lot of music forms kind of either it's change or die, and yet there's this sort of inherent mutability in the form that because things change fast, it knows how to, it can change with them and almost weirdly remain the same. That's been the mystery for me. Like, how is it possible so late in the game that you and others can just still make these adjustments and thrive under these new, strange technological environments? You know, and I know your new album, it has differences. And it is a lot more, I think it's a lot more, we'll go into that. We'll go into that. I want to talk to you about that in a second. But,
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a culture whose backbone is really, you know, like you could do this with it, right? Just, I mean, you make the beat on the table, or you beatbox. You know, I mean, you take this thing with you, and so the ability to transform and adapt and make something out of nothing. I mean, isn't that really where it comes from? So yeah, bring on any tools, invent something. We'll figure out how to use it.
Is that how you
the idea
started?
behind sampling, absolutely.
to describe it, I'd like to know.
The early origins
Yeah,
of
were you
of-
tapping on the table and getting everybody upset?
Absolutely, yeah. I tell you,
Eat
some
your
of the
food.
some of the earliest memories that I have, you know, are rapping in the hallways at Centerfield Elementary, fifth grade, and me and a friend of mine, we actually we called our crew Chaos, K-A-O-S. Me,
Love
him,
the adaptation there.
and a beatboxer
That's right.
who was a black female fourth grader. She introduced me to the Fat Boys. Shannon Gathright was her name. She was SMG, then we had DOC, and I was RMC.
Whoa.
I'm talking fifth grade, man.
Wow.
We didn't even write our own stuff. We would just rap LL Cool J's.
Yeah, I was
stuff.
wondering who. Was it
Ice-T stuff.
Ice-T, LL?
6 in the morning, police at my door.
Oh.
Fifth grade, man. A couple of white dudes and a black beatboxer. Chaos. That's how it started. So yeah, we could make beats on the table. By the time that I was in 7th or 8th grade, I started to amass, much to my mother's dismay, a collection of studio equipment, just piece by piece. And I had an old Akai sampler, you know, with the keyboard controls. And
That's right.
I mean, I had a Lisa SR16 drum machine that I would use to make the beats. And it was very crude, but I still have some of that music that I was making even in middle school and then on into high school. We would do talent shows. We performed at the county fair. Honest to God, like this is just some weird shit, man. Like this is something nobody else had done. You don't rap at the Oldham County Fair. You know, I mean, like right after the beauty contest and just before they judge the sheep. You know, honest to God, we're up
It's
there
like
rapping.
Napoleon Dynamite, they're judging the udder structure on the cows, and then
I
now we're
know
going
that my
to-
homie Deuce is out there watching right now. Deuce, pay attention, because he'll want me to tell this part of the story. There were 4 acts in the talent show. We didn't place. They gave a third place, second place, or a runner-up, and grand prize. And I think the message was pretty clear. We don't like rap here. That's LaGrange, Kentucky, just outside of Louisville.
Wow.
Louisville's.
Louisville.
That's how my people call it.
Mouthful
Yeah.
of marbles there.
Louisville. But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of that's a brief summary of the early origins. But yeah, making something out of nothing, or you know, just trying to grab a piece of equipment here and make do with it. It worked. It really worked, because it's what compelled me to keep creating music in the future.
I'm going to try and make a kind of a global connection here. There's something where you can, there's something to be said for things that can come from nothing. Like as you
Jesus had a lot to say about those things.
Well, what you're talking about specifically is tapping on the 3 elementary school kids, and a beatbox, no real instruments. Think of soccer. We're about to start the World Cup. Yeah. All it takes to play that is a ball.
Accessibility.
Yeah, accessibility.
That's the key to global connection, connectivity, or the ability to relate is accessibility. And this is what strikes me. And I just want to make this point, and then we'll finish it.
Beautiful.
Okay.
I'll make one more point.
There's no race for points. That's the beautiful thing about this format here, is that we're not limited. The Lair show is 30 minutes long. This can be as long as it wants to be.
There is a dissolution of the middle class in hip hop, but I think at the same time there is a growing base of the underclass in hip hop, and that has a lot to do with what you were saying about soccer ball, right? I mean, if this is all you have, you'll make do with it. And if you want access to it, you'll get it. You'll find it. You will make your way in. You'll play ball with this. Meanwhile, at the advanced level of materialistic, corporate-driven hip-hop music, the only hip-hop music that continues to make money. I mean, there's Jay-Z, there's Kanye. There's not a whole lot, right? And it's going further and further this way.
Right.
I mean, really, anybody who is successful in rap right now is only rapping about money. And so
I bet you might have something to say about that.
We'll get into that, of course, but and I don't mean to just trivialize the issue. This is not just a rap versus hip hop discussion. This is not this is not bling bling. We are way past that.
Tired, yeah.
That is an old discussion. But what we're talking about is a strong middle class. In any culture, you have to have a strong middle class, right? That's going away in hip hop. So we'll figure out what to do about that.
Well, there's two things. One is the night that we had the hip hop dinner here. Mad Rad started smashing the tables.
Yeah.
And got a beat going. And I always remember. I mean, just out of nothing. There wasn't even food on the table yet.
Right. No, that was interesting because I mean, the whole. I mean, Michael Hebb, my partner in that project, and I talked about it, and we host these dinners where we bring musicians together, and the nights are usually quite predictable. There's always something unique. Some interesting things happen. Pearl Jam plays with the Saturday Nights or something. Things that you don't expect, but. One thing in particular with the hip hop night was that the hip hop community owned that night. We were merely facilitators. Usually we're saying, okay, and who's gonna, we're just tapping people, who's gonna go next, and what song are you gonna bring, and how can we? And this community, the hip hop community, completely took over, and I just stood back and let it unfold, and that to me is significant. It's incredibly culturally relevant with what hip hop has had to do to invent itself and to reinvent itself and to grow and flourish. And it was a little microcosm of that happening. It was amazing. Like you said, they didn't ask if they could bang on the tables. Subsy didn't ask if he could drop a 20-minute beat to start the thing off with. It was just ownership, and I love that aspect of hip hop music.
Yeah, I always like to, my background is such that I take history very seriously. And in hip hop, there's a curious moment in the late 70s. And I always like to bring people back to this situation in New York City. Basically, you have massive budget cuts, education is slashed. New York City went broke in 1975. Gerald Ford says, screw you, New York. Right? I mean, we're not going to bail you out. Public services are cut. This is the situation. This is what hip hop comes out of. Basically, there's nothing. There's absolutely no commitment to the poor, to the underclass, and we live in a world right now. And I want you to have that in mind. And we live in a world right now where often we're told we need to have things to get things started. This is sort of the world we're often. This is the kind of commercial environment that you have to have these means. You have to have this investment made. You have to have it takes money to make money, and all this stuff, right? As if you, as a human being, stripped of all the things that you own, would stop creating, right? And I always think that everybody go back to 1979, look at the Bronx, right? Robert Moses, who was pretty much tearing up the whole city, right, and transforming it into the sort of Manhattan we have today. Sends an expressway right through the Bronx, displaces all sorts of cultures, right? Jewish cultures, black cultures, Latino cultures, all of them removed or decimated, reduced to rubble, right? And this is literally, it is. If you see the images, they're kind of startling. Right. Everybody calls it an H-bomb it dropped on New York City at the time, at least those neighborhoods. And this is where hip hop really comes from, right? And an area of, I want to say an abandoned area, but I'm looking for a better word. Sure. But when you see that, and you see that still, even with nothing, no state support, and by the way, no business support. No one's there. No, businesses don't open. Right. State doesn't show up to pick up your trash, and still, you make music under these conditions. Right. This is to me the remarkable thing, and I always have to remind people, like, don't get swept up about the way what you think your limitations are today. Don't get caught up in them.
In photography and filmmaking, we talk about it a lot.
Oh, yes.
The constraints. And just in creativity in general, I believe, that's why it's a great segue from what you were just saying, a limitation, a constraining of the creative individual actually will create better results or more interesting results, where you have to make something out of nothing or have to make something with less. As we can travel around the world and have a photo shoot crew with 40 people and every piece of equipment you can possibly have, and you know what, at the end of the day, I've probably made better pictures with a 2 megapixel, 3 megapixel camera on the walk between my house and my coffee shop in the morning. And the constraining, and actually that technology constraint was something that had opened my eyes up. And when you think about the similar thing that happened in the roots of hip hop, I think we can probably say that a lot of great art has been made by constraining the inputs and allowing people to really generate something spectacular as an output.
Yeah.
I think that's why Detroit is on top right now, at least in terms of hip hop.
Oh, even in terms of techno.
That's a great point, actually.
Oh, no.
The place is empty. There are 100 skyscrapers that don't have a single office in them, and the music community there.
Really good music right now.
Yeah, but they have been for a long time.
Sure.
Do you know? I mean, even post Motown, right? Which was their sort of glory. That moment was great music, great economy, right? And so, but the moment of techno. Right? I remember Techno City came out and they were talking about a futuristic city. I mean, this is Model 500, and you're hearing this idea of Techno City, and they're like describing it as sleek, and you're wondering, oh my gosh, where are they? This is not Detroit that I hear about in the news. Yeah. Where are they seeing this Detroit? And I just love the fact that the imagination just took over. If you can't see Techno City, well, we'll have to create it through the cultural software that we have. So anyway, I love Detroit, and Detroit is doing well. And, so is Seattle. I mean, to me, Seattle is another situation where, of course, I don't know, but we're doing that badly in terms of the recession. But for some reason, the past 5 years in Seattle have been quite exciting.
Musically,
very exciting.
Right.
This is not to diss the old cats. I mean, we have a history in Seattle of hip hop that extends pretty much, Sir Mix-a-Lot to the early to mid '80s, when they used to have, what's it called, Street
Sounds.
Street Sounds.
Yeah.
When we used to KCMU. I don't know what it's called. KXP. On KXP.
Well, they're still doing Street Sounds. It used to be Rap Attack back on KCMU.
Oh, that's what it was. It was Rap Attack. Well done.
To Street Sounds.
Yes.
And now Larry is actually continuing on that tradition that B Mello left and others before him. It's true. The past 5 years have. Basically, I think what it boils down to is people are paying more attention, specifically those with positions of power or privilege. primarily speaking about media, people at The Stranger, people at KEXP. These people are covering local hip-hop. They're playing local hip-hop. They're letting other people know what's happening in the local hip-hop community. That's something that didn't exist to this degree back before, certainly pre-millennium, but really not much before 2004 and 2005. And I think that's important to say, even though you might not have understood anything I just said.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, to say that the past 5 years have been a defining moment in Seattle hip-hop history is not to negate what came before. It's not to say that what's being produced now is better than what was being produced then. People are paying attention. We're getting radio play, and that makes a huge difference. You know, groups like Common Market or Blue Scholars are still not getting radio play on Cube. This is corporate radio,
right?
And they're still so much bound to a national format. They don't have the liberties of programming like KEXP does. Right. So we're still not getting radio play on a station like Cube, which I think would change things. This is not an appeal for corporate radio play, but I'm just saying it certainly would change things, even here in our city.
Well, let me dive in just for 1 second. And there is something interesting that's going on with KEXP's move to New York as well, with Radio New York. You know, you get the John Richards going over there and sticking his roots in, and that is a way that the Seattle music scene, you know, don't talk about grunge, talk about hip hop and electronic, because both those things are coming out of Seattle really good. That we are getting somewhat of a foothold in New York right now, which is, you know, I find admirable about the things.
Scholars are selling out shows in New York.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happened, so I think it's fair to say, yeah, if they play a show at Bowery or wherever it was that they play a show in New York, yeah. I mean, they're bringing people out. So yeah, there is a connection, which is important. But again, some people just never had that opportunity, and it is unfortunate. I feel very blessed, feel privileged to have been a part of the second Seattle hip hop wave, as Charles defines it, right around 2005. And if it wasn't for me being in the right place at the right time and aligning with the right people, I wouldn't be able to do the Victor Shade project. I mean, I'd still be able to do it in terms of access. People would have a very different perception of it.
Which is third wave hip hop.
Third wave. That's a great deal. You know, one of the things.
I might be the only MC in Seattle who's able to ride multiple waves. Is that fair to say? Hey, I'm gonna go for 4th and 5th.
All right.
In my 40s.
And that's one of the things that I love about you. I mean, you've performed a private concert that I was at, and it was just like there was 5,000 people in the room, except there was 50, and you sent it so hard. It's really fun to watch how much you love the art that you're creating and want to share it, because the people on the other side of it, we feel it. The writing multiple waves and Victor Shade that just came up. We're starting to get a lot of questions online here, and I'm going to grab one, which was. It's from Garrett Gibbons, and again, if you want to write in, do so via Twitter and use hashtag CJLive. What Garrett asked is, why is Victor Shade Son's label? And what do you think about that?
Sure, yeah, why don't you tackle this one first, because for me to speak on it would be pointless.
With that label?
Yeah, well, what's the...
does anybody worry about labels anymore? And I'm quite serious about
that. I think I got a label back here in my shirt.
I mean,
somewhere.
labels are fine, but it sort of amazes me. I don't. It used to be 10 years ago, yeah. Labels were vital to the survival of any project. Right. And right now, half the albums that I really enjoy are not attached to record labels. They're just not. And if I don't use a record label anymore as a measure for what I'm listening to. I mean, there's some great record labels out there. You know, Stone's Throw Records in LA and others. I mean, but I don't buy a record because I don't download a record. I don't even know which label. I don't know if it has a label or not. I don't know if I'm the only one who buys things that way. I just like something now, and I just go and figure out how do you get it. You know, and if there's usually I try to buy it. and if that's there, and you know that's how it works. I really, as a critic, and I do review hip hop records from from around the country.
Sure, Village Voice
yeah.
and Time Out New York, and, sure.
And so on. And I don't, sure. Again, I'll repeat this. I mean, there are some labels that do have a reputation. Of Seattle. Recently was attached very closely to the Rhymesayers in Minneapolis and things like that. So you had Gray Skull coming out of that label, and I think Vitamin D was also attached to that label as well.
Jake One as well.
And Jake One just released, with Freeway. I mean, there is. So he's there.
Yeah, you're acknowledging the fact that it does still serve a role, serve a purpose.
Purpose,
yeah. There is a purpose for labels to continue to exist on multiple levels. And to answer Garrett's question, who, by the way, was the director of the first and only Victor Shade video, the one for Soothsayer. Garrett's a fantastic filmmaker. The active pursuit of a label is not something that we're chasing after right now. We being me and MTK. Both of us have connections. We have a broad network of folks who are connected to record labels, both major and independent. And neither one of us would be averse to the idea of establishing a relationship with a label, but it's for the purpose of support in various forms.
Not choosing the direction, but supporting the direction.
Exactly. Right. It has a lot less to do with branding now, I think, in terms of a marketing strategy, but it's more about marketing ability. Yeah. And these things are still important. Seattle is very much deprived of a management network. We collectively, this Seattle hip hop culture, we spent so much time and energy teaching young kids how to break dance and teaching them how to DJ or teaching them how to write raps. We did all these seminars. I mean, really, for the past 5 years, a lot of this community outreach stuff that we talk about, is going into schools or to clubs or teen centers and giving workshops, right? But we haven't taught anybody how to manage groups.
Right.
This is really important. And so we don't have that solid infrastructure in Seattle. When we talk about management companies in Seattle, it's a few people, really. There's not a broad network of management happening in Seattle. And so we do look to labels still. Right. And I think like Scholar's relationship with not only Cafe yeah.
Oh, I blew it for you?
No. Cafe Vita as well as Duck Down. This is a symbiotic relationship, and it's working well. Could they achieve the same thing without that support? Probably, but it's a different mechanism.
I've shown an interest in that for some time, and I'm talking to a handful of different groups about acting in a similar fashion. And the idea of supporting music through a means of just connecting them with a larger audience, rather than dictating all of the things that are a part of the message. And playing that kind of that secondary role is really intriguing to me when I think about how I want to spend some of my time or resources. It would be to facilitate that stuff. So, if the question, going back to Garrett's question, is like, why didn't you do it? It's because you don't have to. Really, it's not a requirement. I mean, the canon, the machine that used to make art and put it out into the world, you used to, as an artist, require permission from that machine, and now permission is not required by anybody. In a few minutes' time, you can have the mechanisms for distribution and for sharing your ideas online, and if it's good, they will come. And this is the first time in the history of the world
that qualifier. If it's good.
If it's good. But even the paper I work for, The Stranger, our model has changed. Well, I'm not surprised that there is a Duck Down, Cafe Vita, a cafe and a record label collaboration for the distribution of that record. That sounds normal to me now. Anybody who thinks that sounds odd is in trouble, right? Anybody who thinks that that's kind of funky,
things are changing.
You're gone. You're going to be. You're going to be.
Yeah, I'm having huge companies, Fortune 500 companies, and ad agencies coming to say, here's our product, and the creative brief says, what do you want to do? This brand will enable you to make what it is that you want to make, and that the message is going to be that they're enabling you.
That's right.
And as an artist, that's amazing. It's that amazing, and it's that unique crossover from commercial art to fine art. And I'm going to continue to talk in the this next year about the disintegration between those two lines, because now when a corporation is willing to put some money behind it with no strings attached, it's starting to get interesting.
That's important.
It is, but it's starting to get interesting. I want to interrupt for just 1 second and say I would love it if we could get another mimosa for Charles, another Bloody Mary for myself, and a top run coffee if it's possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to me. I feel like I got the sense when we first kicked this thing off that you wanted to kind of drill down a little bit into some of Ra's recent history and kind of look at where he's going. I was wondering if you could take us on that journey.
Well, okay. As a critic at The Stranger, we pretty much started writing about the scene. There wasn't, in Seattle, there was a grunge scene that was not a grunge scene, I'd say indie rock scene at that time. From Modest Mouse on down to what's going on today.
Sure.
And that was thriving. It's always thriving. It's been doing very well. And in fact, I always love and always admired how committed a lot of the young people were to their bands in this town.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really, and then again, there's an infrastructure for that relationship between the indie rock community and the producers and the consumers.
Sure.
And there wasn't really that, as he pointed out, for hip hop. And so around the start of the O's, we began to write about. There's actually a guy called Brian Getty, who used to write for The Rocket. And actually Brian Getty was the first person. The Rocket was the big indie paper here, and he was the first person to really write about the indie scene. And I sort of caught it in the Rocket. I sort of caught it while I was writing for The Stranger. Said, we should do this too. And so I started writing about hip hop, and then he came and joined us at The Stranger, and we started building this language, this way to talk about what's going on. And one of the bands that we sort of saw as we're going along, it takes a while to develop this relationship.
Voice.
Well, one of the early bands, one was of course Blue Scholars, and that was Gio and Sabzi, and that was quite amazing. That if there wasn't a structure to communicate to the community, that would have probably just slipped and gone back into the ether. I mean, who would have known? But then suddenly people started writing about it all over. I mean, there was a lot more writing going on. And it stuck. It worked. People started paying attention. And then soon after that, he comes along, right? You were doing a lot of stuff, right? I mean, you had already released a CD the year before, and you were really just working, getting all the pieces together, and establishing a reputation in the city. And then he released Common Market, and it just exploded. It was quite amazing. And then everybody knew that, and then followed other acts as well, and then it just was a surge, and everybody knew everything had changed. And so, I
gotta say that, like, everybody knew that something had changed, and there have been a couple of those markers. And for me, again, not completely saturated in the hip hop market, but as a hip hop appreciator, I even me, somewhat on the outside, felt that change.
Yeah.
And it was a change definitely in and around the Blue Scholar when Common Market really started getting traction. It was so you could feel it, you could smell it. It was in the air.
That's because it smelled like hippies. That's what it was.
Well, I'm glad you guys also brought global justice to the house. You brought it and made it a subject for hip hop, which is great because that was I never heard anybody just just talk about be philosophical, deeply self-reflective, and then be strongly attached to global issues. Fair trade, the way we spend money, neoliberalism, and all of these things came, and it was quite a I'm always looking for words as a writer. I'm always looking for words, and yes, I know. And then
whatever it was, I think it might have been too much too fast.
Why did you say that?
Because we had a mixed reaction amongst a very broad demographic. It became soapbox rap. It became the epitome of conscious backpack rap, which is a term that had carried over from the mid-90s.
We can get
Ironically, conscious backpack rap. again, ironically, which is something that Brand Nubian really, I think, takes credit for being at the fore of, especially, you know, Grand Poobah. I mean, that was some early backpack rap, right? And it was conscious.
I thought it was Black Moon. Was sort of my idea.
Well, sure, yeah. And they all come out of the same vein, I think. But anyway, what happened was there started to become an influx of white folks who were rapping. And then when you started to rap about, you know, conscious political stuff, it took on a whole new connotation. And for some people, it just didn't sit well. And I get that. I understand it.
Can I ask a question as someone who's on the outside and for whom that resonated? And that's, you know, we're talking to a really broad audience online today about a cross-section. It's mostly made up of independent creatives, but that's the thing that brought me really to the table where the rubber was meeting the road, was that it was bigger than hip-hop, or bigger than this town. It doesn't fall outside hip-hop because hip-hop is so elastic and can accommodate so many things, but that it was bigger than the messaging that I was familiar with in the traditional hip-hop sphere. And there was a self-awareness and a cultural awareness in it that I hadn't heard before.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to make a point here. Seattle's always been a little interesting. I'm not sure if this is fair for, say, somewhere like Minneapolis, which I think is close to Seattle, and also something like Def Jux. I think this was, but Seattle in the mid-90s, K Records, right, out of Olympia, who were, you know, released Beck, and, you know, of course, I mean, they're legendary. I mean, they actually were releasing hip-hop. It just, nobody noticed it.
Right.
So there was already this interesting relationship between underground hip-hop and the indie rock scene. And I think that's actually deeper than a lot of people really know or recognize. And again, I think the bigness you're talking about was suddenly there were all these tools that were available to a variety of people, and to connect things and make it feel bigger than it was before. Whereas before it was harder to, these are more sort of isolated incidences. Although they're very interesting, there just was no internet to begin with, in the way we have it today.
Sure.
I mean, just to be frank, I know everybody says, "Oh, the internet changed everything," but it actually kind of did. You know, I mean, you know, and it's not a cliche. I mean, it's a cliche that's true. Right. You know, I mean, it's hard to get around and say, well, it wasn't the radio, it wasn't the
carrier pigeon.
Yeah, it wasn't. You know, it was exactly the internet, and also everybody taking a lot more seriously the content of the internet. I mean, I'm going to say one quick thing. I'm also an academic, and I remember in the '90s, nobody took anything seriously, on academic terms, if it was on the web. Right, they still depended on journals, and in a way they still do.
Sure.
But these days, you can do all of your research, and no one will think you a lesser person, a low creature for resorting to the internet to take your information. And so there's this massive change, and so I think that happens at all levels, where now people do take seriously hip hop, that it makes its appearance and is distributed and circulated on the web, and that was important for Seattle.
I think it was important for art in general, because I'm hearing now from museums and galleries through the online channel. And I mean, those arguably are some of the most conservative and protective institutions in our country, a museum. And if they're out there scouring and finding what something like myself or one of you guys is doing, and that is a justifiable reason for them to connect and reach out, boy, that is a sign that we've crossed the threshold.
Yes, we have, and that was 2005, and I think it's really important. I think it's very significant that all of these economic factors are aligned, and suddenly we do have in Seattle a new influx of talent. Right? You got to remember, people are coming. You're coming into Seattle, right? I'm coming into Seattle. We're all immigrants, pretty much. I mean, I know a lot of people come from Seattle, but a lot of the people who are doing stuff were coming from out of Seattle and bringing what they had and connecting to all of the networks, be they event networks or label networks or so on and so on. And you just saw this happen, and it was wonderful, because you weren't rapping about Seattle. I mean, you had some raps that were sort of
pretty subtle
focused, to Seattle, but there was a lot of stuff.
Seattle-centric.
It wasn't Seattle-centric, and that was another important thing. You know,
that was just by virtue of the fact that the music was being created on Beacon Hill. I mean, we recorded that first Common Market album in Sobs and Gio's attic, you know, on Beacon Hill. That place was 110 degrees when we recorded that whole album. I mean, yeah,
Why it's so hot.
we really labored over that whole process. It was, yeah.
Let me park us in Seattle for a second, and we've made some references to some other cities, and actually there's a lot of questions coming in about this topic particularly. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And if you could do another round of that, I don't know. It may be hard to grind that coffee and keep it quiet, but you'll be right. Thanks, bud. You know, we've already talked about what's going on. We've mentioned Minneapolis. We got Brother Ali. We got Slug. There's a lot of people. We've mentioned the Bay, which my kind of understanding, and again from a somewhat of an ignorant perspective, that's really cooled off. It seems to me to have cooled off.
Definitely cooled off, as far as I'm concerned.
And then we're talking about Detroit, and so Christopher Stamper is writing in. He's wanting to know a little bit about what's going on in Detroit. If you guys can comment on that a little bit.
I mean, the best thing I could say is, like, you know, go back to Tribe's, one of Tribe's last albums, The Love Movement, and check for Dilla's production around that time period of Tribe Called Quest, Love Movement, and then track Dilla's production up until the time of his death, you know, through more of the Slum Village work and De La Soul and so much of that Native Tongues era and type music. Start from there, and then let it take you all the way to like Royce the 5'9". You'll get check out. Yeah, it's a journey, and again, it's almost like making that comparison about what Common Market is doing versus what somebody like Dime Def is doing. Like, they're created in the same space. They're influenced by a lot of the same factors, but the end product is so much different because it's about that process. How do you process it, right? Check for Black Milk. I mean, there's so many, you know, and I'm never able to recall properly and put people onto the right people. But yeah, Detroit hip hop is beautiful right now. Like, it's real, it's tangible. Like, again, I think Detroit, in terms of like which city in the United States is hot right now, and that's so important in hip hop. Like, what's hot right now? Who's hot right now? Detroit really is on top.
So is Philadelphia.
Philly, yeah.
You know,
and LA.
It's funny. We'll talk more about like in the context of this discussion. You know, like what is the Seattle hip hop sound? That's a concept that gets tossed around so often, and so many people want to ask, what is that definitive Seattle hip hop sound? There's not one, and there's such a laborious discussion about why that is, or how do we solve it, or who is it that we're going to rally behind to promote as the Seattle representative, our one Seattle delegate, right? Our hip hop delegate. Look at other cities. Look at places like Chicago. Like, how many rappers can you name out of Chicago? Maybe a handful. How many rappers can you name out of Washington, D.C.? Wale. Maybe Tabi Bonney as well, but a lot of people aren't familiar with Tabi Bonney. That guy is phenomenal. But D.C. makes great hip hop music. How many rappers can you name out of Boston? I'm talking major label successful, you know, rappers that get mainstream exposure, that type of thing. These are major cities in the United States that are still possibly struggling to put somebody on or to have a representative. So it doesn't really say anything negative about Seattle as a city or as a community or as a culture or whatever, that we don't have that one representative. The point is, we're making fantastic music. We're making some really crappy music too, but that gets sorted out, you know, it does. And I think that we have some very effective mechanisms in place in Seattle to filter that stuff. And I'll go ahead and mention it, 206proof.com. Our premier, our being Seattle, our premier hip hop discussion forum, right? A lot of stuff gets filtered through 206 Proof. And I think that's essential. It keeps a whole lot of people in check. I mean, there's a whole lot of shenanigans too, right? I mean, it's not the end all be all, but if that mechanism wasn't in place, we'd be in trouble. We'd really be in trouble. It keeps a whole lot of things in check. So anyway, I say all that to say, like, let's stop worrying about putting Seattle on the map. That discussion is just as tired as you know, backpack rap, conscious rap versus
hip-hop, and that's why I want to talk about Minneapolis. I want to talk about Detroit. You mentioned Philly, and we shouldn't stop there. We should go abroad to Paris, for example. It's amazing stuff.
Even Stuttgart.
Stuttgart, yeah. We talked about that briefly the night.
Yeah, no, I'm totally wherever hip hop comes from. I mean, it's great that that it has this versatility and this and all this and this accessibility for so many people around the world. But you know, to me, hip hop is about this. How do I put this? It's very difficult to express. I don't really. It comes from so many points to me. I am not. It doesn't. You know what I mean? It's not. I don't. I just listen to what's really good. Then I find out what's going on, and then I see that it's happening in Ghana, or it's happening in Tokyo. You know, which is that's the relationship.
But that's a consumer's perspective.
Sure.
Or at least what was the term you used? A cultural critic's perspective,
Sure.
right? As an artist, I cannot be disingenuous about the fact that that hip hop as a culture continues to be extremely territorial. It still is very much about where you come from.
Yeah, that's true. But
It ain't where you're from; it's where you're at. That's a mantra that's lived, you know, for longer than 30 years in the hip hop culture. I mean, yeah, to some degree, I disagree with it. That's why I rapped about Tobacco Road and about being from Kentucky. To me, it's all about being where you're from. You have to make that connection. If you don't know where you're from, it's going to be really difficult to be comfortable where you're at.
Yeah, but you know what? Here it is. I find that to be more of a signal than an imposition. It's more of a, there's life over here. Look, right? It's not. We're coming into your town and we're taking over, right?
In some ways it is. And if you've ever toured, you'd know that. It's true. If you're ever on the road as an artist, you'll know that. You travel to a different city. So far, up to this point, all I've really been able to experience is like a West Coast leg of a tour. We've done Western States tours, right? And we have a very strong following in places like Colorado. I mean, we could go to Fort Collins, to Boulder, Colorado Springs, and sell out shows.
Well, I've bumped into New York when you're doing stuff there.
New York is a different place altogether.
It's its own animal.
Yeah, that is completely different. But yeah, even in these Western states, where we've developed a semi-loyal fan base, you know, people who actually pay attention to what we're doing, it's still all about being from Seattle. It's weird, man.
That is weird.
It's weird, man. But it's true. It's true. So again, I don't mean to imply that it doesn't matter that we're making music in Seattle. It does, but it doesn't have to be Seattle-centric. The same way that it had to be New York-centric in the 80s.
Right.
And even into the early 90s. It had to be that way. Because you had to establish the fact that you were making music, not only in New York City, but you break it down to the borough or even down into the particular street that you're representing. East Coast, West Coast. And that's still the point of reference that so many of us who are my age, people who are still paying attention to hip-hop culture, or people who are still participating in the development of hip-hop culture, we have that point of reference. And it does very much matter where you're from. So it's trying to find that balance. I'll say it right now, I'll never write Seattle-centric music. It's not in me. This is not my home. I happen to be here right now. And it profoundly affects the way that I process a whole lot of things. Seattle has made me a different person than I was than I was when I got here. And I moved to Seattle in 2001. And over the course of the past 9 years, I have become a very different person because of Seattle. But I'm not from here.
There's a bunch more questions that are pouring in here. One of them is, Chase, you're talking about hip hop, and I thought you were into MGMT. But we want to.
How many slams are you getting?
Yeah, a couple.
Come on, read all the ones that are written.
But I think let's. I want to just address not that particular thing, but again, this is really about a fusion of creative ideas, and when you think about what influences you, or us, or arguably everyone at the table, it's so broad. No, you can't subject yourself to just one channel of influence anymore in mass culture. That's one of the things that I think is made my life a richer experience for me, and I hope that the people that are paying attention are out there kind of sinking their teeth into things that are outside what you think you're capable of taking in.
Hip-hop is just the context of this discussion. We're not just talking about rap and hip-hop, you know, but yeah, these are all, we're talking about culture. The development of culture, the existence of culture, the importance of culture, the effect of culture, and it's all in just a hip-hop context, primarily because that's all we know.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's a little bit more chatter going on about the geography thing. I'm getting beat up pretty hard on the old Twitter sphere about saying that the Bay Area has cooled off.
Ooh, I knew that was coming, and I'm so impressed that it did. Wow.
I was waiting for it too.
Your
say it's cooled
viewership
off.
is really on
just,
point.
As a critic, show me.
If
show me what's
we're
happening.
recording this, rewind the tape and look at my posture and how it changed right as the two of you made that comment. I knew it was coming.
I went down to the Bay Area and I was looking around and I just couldn't even in the newspapers find anything that was happening. And that's what I'm after. I mean, when I go into a city, I really want to know what's the
Husala, Lil B.
Yeah.
Husala and Lil B have been cited.
Okay,
Sure,
I'll go look.
They're still making music, and that's not going to change.
Yeah.
What has changed is the way that people are paying attention to what's happening in the Bay because of what's being marketed as Bay Area music. I mean, really, for all intents and purposes, the Bay Area became synonymous with the hyphy movement. And once that movement came and went, from a marketing standpoint, I'm saying once that star, shot across the stratosphere or whatever, people stopped paying attention. Ooh, that was hyphy. That was like, doors open, man. Doors open, man. That type of stuff, right? This face. That became hot for a minute. And then people were like, oh, well, that's done. So the Bay Area must be done. And that's not true. Like, the hyphy movement did not define Bay Area music. It was a significant part of the culture that they had created as Bay Area hip hop, but it wasn't the only thing that was going on. And Hieroglyphics continues to keep producing things, right? I mean, they're still touring, they're still releasing music, they've got their clothing line thing going on. Like, Hyro is still very much relevant in hip hop culture. And I think they, more so than any other crew, define what's happening in the Bay.
I'm just reminded, it's Hustler, Chase.
Oh, it's Hustler. You said Husla.
Husala. But that's
I thought it was a new Muslim rapper out of the Bay.
beautiful. But it's beautiful. I'm happy to reveal my ignorance on that. I'm good at that. I'm good at dropping those balls. I'm not afraid of it.
You have to work on your hip hop spelling bee.
Yeah. But I take pride in failing on live television. It's great.
No.
Talk to me a little bit about the transition from the Common Market project. I know that's something
that's actually what I want to hear, because I'm also as curious about that as well. I mean, as I said, there was a distinct sound to the Common Market, and the new record, of course. I mean, I love MTK, and I love what he's done in terms of like his production. I mean, but it's very different from Sabzi. It's not the same. And Sabzi, particularly when he's working with you, because Sabzi is also versatile. But you guys worked on a specific groove, right? And you did quite successfully. I mean, and but now there's you're developing another kind of groove with MTK, and it's got more energy in terms of like, and it's more explosive, and also has got a sort of rock arena feel to it sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And I feel like the source that MTK draws from, and I love the source, but the sort of that Just Blaze kind of school of really of production values, and he does it. I mean, it's not to discredit him. I mean, he does it really well, but I can tell that, my goodness, he's using a different kind of approach. Maybe he's from Everett. Maybe he's got maybe it's for, he's using something that's happening there. I mean,
Everett is not a suburb of Paris either. It's just up the street here.
Just up the street, yes. I was going to wonder if the Boeing production line had an impact on that sound. It's got a very big feel to it, right?
That's actually what struck me when the first time I heard the album, is that the sound is so much bigger than melodic. Sabzi has a certain kind of stitching, a fabric that he makes, and this is a lot more. It pushes more.
Yeah, well, if you had spent your sophomore afternoons drinking at Jimmy Z's, then your end product would probably sound somewhat familiar. Yeah, different. Yeah, of course. As an artist, I think you're always trying to reinvent yourself. You don't want to be stale. You don't want to be the guy that everybody thinks that you are, right? Especially when some of your most vocal critics have completely written you off as being credible. That's something to an artist that's very important, is credibility. What's the point of me actually writing or recording or trying to distribute a message if people right off the bat are already discrediting my credibility? So that was important. I had to evaluate a whole lot of things with the rise of Common Market. And I do spend a large amount of time paying attention to the negative things that people say about Common Market. I don't regret that at all. I really don't. There are so many people who...
What could you say about Common Market?
What kind of negative things?
I'm totally, I can't believe this.
Hey, first of all,
You've already established the fact that you're an academic, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's who the music appeals to, is the academic community, right? I mean, you've got the blue scholars, and everything that Common Market has done, by some measure, has been an extension of what the blue scholars have done. So, I mean, you've got blue scholars. I mean, by definition, they are the academic raps, right? It appeals to you, and so does Common Market. And as the distinctions that you make are because of your familiarity with the genre. But you take somebody who's not exposed to rap music. They don't really have a point of reference that goes back before 2005, right? They're not able to make too many distinctions between blue scholars and Common Market. They become synonymous, right? In many ways. Then you add to the fact that I am a white male, right? I mean, what could I possibly have to rap about that represents struggle? Which is important. I don't think that you can have good hip-hop music, like we established already that the music has to be good. How do you define good, right? So this is a philosophical discussion, but you can't have, in my opinion, I'll say it plainly, you cannot have good hip-hop music that's not rooted in struggle.
I don't know about that. That's
it's an opinion. Yeah, this is my opinion. So let me finish the train of thought, and then we'll come back to your station.
Yes.
So to me, that's what defines good hip-hop music. Music that people can have access to. It's got to be about a struggle. Well, being a white male from the middle class, I couldn't very well rap about life in the ghetto. I couldn't rap about being economically deprived, or I couldn't rap about certain socioeconomic conditions that my black counterparts could rap about, right? Furthermore, I couldn't use the N-word, which is another point of discussion. There's value in this N-word in hip-hop, a tremendous value. It distinguishes a black rapper from a white rapper. A white rapper is not allowed to use the N-word. So when you hear a song, whether it's on the radio, on your iPod, streaming it, whatever the case, and you hear the N-word, you know that's a black rapper. And it affects the way that you listen to the music. It affects not so much you, because I think you've established the fact that you've got this much more global view of hip-hop. Not everybody listens to it the same way, though. Some people are still very much interested in who's rapping, where are they from, what are they about.
Mac, I want to just interject because I know you got something big to say. I got something small to say. Macklemore dances around that pretty elegantly.
Okay, that's true. Yeah,
he
does. That was his first big record.
Yeah,
race is very important in hip-hop. I think that's the point to be made.
Yeah, he does a great job of addressing...
Race is still very much important in hip-hop music.
But he really talks about it in, I don't know how to do this. I'm doing the best I can, trying to dance in and around this major cornerstone of hip-hop, being a white, privileged kid from the suburbs, and Grinch even to the same, to a similar nod. But it's people are dancing around, and I think your point is well taken that there is a certain gravity in and around that is and is not afforded depending on your history, your socioeconomic history, your struggle. Charles.
Well, okay, I want to go back because I have to go. Always go back. Always go back.
Rewind. And there's a ton of stuff coming in here too.
Yeah,
so.
One thing that really impressed me earlier on in hip hop, and I discovered hip hop in Zimbabwe, and so I sort of saw it from a distance. And if you see something from a distance, you're not only a part of it, but you're also scrutinizing it, right? Because you're seeing it from the outside, but you're also enjoying it. That's what I mean. You're a part of the pleasure, but you're also constantly analyzing how are they doing this? What's going on? What I noticed really early on in hip hop is that, and this is what was really lost. I've talked about this with Larry again and again. So this is me. Mazel, yeah. Larry Mazel and I have conversations about hip hop all the time. We don't agree all the time, and I don't agree with a lot of people all the time. But what I did notice, and very early on, and I think it still persists in the underground, not so much at all in the overground, in the commercial rap, in the commercial world, was that was the variety of the rappers at the very beginning. I mean, you could say that you could say that, yes, that they're mostly black. It's true, but they're talking about all sorts of things. There wasn't this unified. There was conscious rap. There was when I used to buy. I used to look and just see what it is that they're doing, and it's always kind of different. There was, of course, there was gangster. There was rap. There was also geek rap with De La Soul. There was this flower hippie rap. I mean, it was all over the place. There was no central.
It wasn't homogenous.
It was not.
Yeah.
This is what was really lost when it went commercial. This is really the death, I always say, of that.
The jiggy era.
Yes.
That's how we define it. Yeah, the jiggy era.
And then that was, and to me, when it goes underground, I mean, to me, it doesn't mean. There's no way, if hip hop was so close, you could have had the Beastie Boys be so successful and so well regarded in the 80s. If it wasn't for this fact, well, what have you got? What are you bringing to the table? Mm-hmm. You know, and everybody sort of brought whatever they had, and if it was backed by good music, backed by strong rhymes, right, it was in. And there was a lot of that going on, and I still feel that that particularly when you had in the mid '90s, when you had the big transition, what they did, the corporations did. I'm sorry to bring this up. What they did was, for the sake of money, they actually reduced it. They reduced it, and now it looks. I think it looks more racial to me now than it was even at the very beginning. Weirdly enough, right, I can actually say something crazy like that. That it actually became so. As intentionally, yes, of course. I mean,
limiting supply and demand. And
yeah, well, they wanted
trouble.
a specific. You know, okay. I'm gonna say something really crazy and off the top. Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier started acting about the same time. One of them became famous, and the other one sort of like went on the side. Nobody sort of knew. The one that became super famous was Sidney Poitier, and the reason why Hollywood liked him was because he was clearly black, right? And it was able to transmit a message to the audience, whereas Belafonte was light-skinned, and there was this
racially ambiguous.
Yeah, right. And
that's become the premier marketing strategy right now.
And that's what everybody's up against. And I really don't separate these kinds of these kinds of practices, right, with certain people taking advantage of a market, and it's coding and so forth. This gets a little complicated. I don't want to dive into it, but you get the idea.
I get the idea.
I think that's what happened.
But now that the power structure is changing, and we're seeing the decline or the demise of corporate rap or of commercialized rap, then enter Drake, right?
Yes.
Drake will be one of the most successful commercial rappers ever. Racially ambiguous.
Yes.
It's
so
leaning back the other way.
I never thought of, this is my worst part. I never thought of Drake as a commercial rapper.
Who would have?
I never really.
Who would have 2 years ago, right?
Well,
but look at it now.
Well,
honestly, the kid is making money, and he's rapping about money.
I'm such a
lots and
I
lots.
want to go back to some of the silos you were talking about, and one is like hip hop with a message, and a lot of that. I mean, it all has a message. There's a word that's escaping me. Conscious. Let's go conscious hip hop.
Yeah.
And
KRS-One, for example. KRS-One tapped
him.
Which
on stage.
We tugged on KRS's shirt sleeve a little bit. I mean,
yes. But let me.
Us. Yeah, I just want to make that clear.
Okay, but it was very important. I feel like in your career, when you have someone with that weight in the industry, saying like, one of the foremost, you're continuing in this conscious hip hop, this tradition, and you tap him. He comes up and performs on stage with you here, which is how huge is that? That's like
jumps on the stage.
Unbelievable to have him on stage, and then if I'm not mistaken, you guys went on tour. You backed them on tour. What was that like? I mean, he's absolutely a legend.
Yeah, without question. His legacy, I think, continues to be determined on a daily basis because he's still alive. Had he had the fortune of passing away 10 or 15 years ago,
getting gunned down when he first started appearing with all his guns and
KRS would be, the silkscreen T-shirts, like medallions, honored in such a way that I don't think he'll ever have the privilege of being honored now. So I'll say this much about KRS. in 2003, 2004, 2005, I did highly regard KRS as the teacher. That's one of the many names that people have for KRS.
He's also the philosopher.
The philosopher.
Yeah,
He's a lot of different things. I mean, talk about reinventing yourself. This guy is a master. But I still hold him in very high esteem. And I have to say this much, that KRS is to people my age who came up on East Coast hip hop what Snoop Dogg is to West Coast heads. Like, Snoop Dogg continues to make terrible music. Snoop Dogg is rapping on this new Katy Perry single, right? And this verse is awful. It's god awful. There is no way that this is a master at his craft, right? Snoop has fallen off. It's official. Snoop is done. But the West Coast can have him. You just have to give me KRS. Yes, this guy says some crazy, crazy stuff. KRS is out there. He is way out there. But you have to appreciate the reverence that I have for him in the same way that West Coast folks have this reverence for Snoop Dogg. Completely different people, but he is my cultural icon. So to make that connection back in '05, to actually make a personal connection with KRS that was based in this idea of hip-hop culture, even as a religion, hip-hop as a religion. KRS and I sat down at a table and had a discussion about hip-hop being a religion. And he said some pretty crazy things to me. We haven't spoken since, and that's important for people to understand. There's a good reason. Okay. I mean, there's a good probability.
Okay.
There is a strong probability that the reason we haven't maintained communication since that discussion is because my views on hip-hop as a religion were very much different from his. So we covered a whole lot of really interesting things over the span of just 2 or 3 days. But he said some things to me like, you should use the N-word. It creates controversy, and people will pay attention to you.
Yeah, Quentin Tarantino would tell you the same thing.
Absolutely, sure. You know, he told me that I should say that I'm aligned with Al-Qaeda. These types of things. Like, we explored a whole bunch of different philosophies, if you will, right? KRS's philosophies. But I wasn't at a point in my life, and I'm not at a point in my life now, where I was ready to embrace these ideas.
For the sake of them, you know?
Yes, yeah.
That sounds kind of heavy.
And so I say that because people still continue to ask me about my relationship with KRS-One. Like, what is it? What does it mean? What's the relevance of it now? It was nothing more than having the opportunity to connect with that cultural icon, you know, I was seeking validation to some degree, but it was more so a personal validation than it was a commercial validation. Like, hey, everybody should buy my album because there's a sticker on the front with a quote from KRS-One. That was pretty insignificant. It wasn't for the sake of selling albums. This was a personal connection that I needed to make for the sake of understanding my role in hip-hop culture.
Can I ask you a question, just real quickly? Yeah. What's your relationship? Speaking of relationships, what's your relationship with Sabzi now that you're doing this project?
It hasn't changed much since he moved to New York. You know, from the way it was when he lived here in Seattle. Like, Sabz and I don't really move in the same social circles. We never have. We were introduced through mutual friends because we're both Baha'is. So through a Baha'i friend, we were introduced to each other and somewhat encouraged to make music together. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, you two boys run along and play, and Common Market is what came as a result. But the time was right. You know, the time was definitely right for us to do what we did. If it wasn't for the connection that we made through music, Sabz and I probably never would have met. Like, really, we don't hang out in the same social circle. Mm-hmm. Any of the mutual friends that we have right now that we've created since the formation of Common Market have just been on that pretense and that basis of music. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. But are you still making music though? Are you still making music?
No, we're not.
You're not?
No, we're not. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we move in different social circles. Take Macklemore, for example. Like, in my opinion, I think it makes a lot more sense for Sabzi to produce an album for Macklemore right now than it does for us to make a Common Market album. Because we created the first Common Market album at a time when our circles intersected more so than ever before, and more so since, right? That first Common Market album the self-titled album, in case people are curious, they might not know. When we made that album, it was at a time when we were more connected. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and I think that's what people identify. That's what they get out of that. We had no idea what to expect when we made that album, but because the response was what it was, and because we had people who were interested in working with us and working for us, then we said, okay, let's try it again. Let's take the next step. So we put out another album. Then we toured to support it. Then we formed this Mass Line Collective. Like, we're just taking baby steps.
Sure.
None of this was a master plan that was devised back in 2003 for us to get to where we are in 2010. We really just took it one step at a time.
I'm good friends with Sabzi, and we had lunch not too long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, at Cafe Giton in New York, and he said almost exactly the same thing that you said. This is not some master plan. You know, we're making music, and sometimes you're like this, and then you're kind of like this, and you know, paths may cross again.
Sure.
I mean, I actually liked when you. I'm a huge Common Market fan, obviously, and when you started doing some stuff with the live band, like, you had like 8 pieces behind you or something.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's a beautiful sound.
it's a beautiful piece, and as an independent artist myself, I want to drift in and out of different levels of communication with the people that I collaborate with, co-conspirators, collaborators, and is this somewhat like that when you're just kind of drifting in and out?
Very much so, very much so. And I can't say that it's not hard to catch feelings. You know, like sometimes you do take this stuff personally, particularly when you start to resent things. Not people, but lack of opportunity or missed opportunities and that sort of thing. Like, yes, I will always wonder what would have happened if I would have worked a little bit harder. What would have happened if my motivation was different?
Well,
to become more.
What artist doesn't?
No, exactly.
You know?
I'm not saying that I'm an anomaly.
Okay.
I'm just saying that that's the sort of things that you deal with, and believe me, it can get really tricky in your head. Like people can start to say, well, you know, Saab said this, and then they go back to Saabzi and say, Ra said this, or what's happening with you guys? There is no beef between me and Saabzi. It has nothing to do with a break in our friendship, or with a rift, or anything that we can't get past. When we're talking about the creation of music, we're talking about 2 different things. We're talking about again, accessibility or his availability,
Sure.
us being connected in some way, and then we're talking about what the consumer wants, or what the fan wants. So which way are we creating music? Are we creating it because the time is right, or are we creating it because fans want more common market music?
I'm gonna ask a question or two from people on the internet who are writing in via Twitter to Hashmark, CJ Live. Marco Collins, well-known DJ, describes the Seattle sound as musical intelligence with knowledge, and I don't know. It sounds pretty heavy.
If Marco says it, then you just have to accept it. There are some folks in this community who speak with such authority. Marco is one.
He dropped the bomb there. It was a good one.
No, I gotta be honest, Marco. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Musical intelligence with knowledge?
Yeah, music intelligence.
Oh, I like
music
that.
intelligence.
It sounds. He says it sounds big.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It doesn't have to. I really don't think it does. Let's talk about Vitamin D's production for a second, or even Jake One's production.
Jake One would be probably a good one because he's got a larger. I love Vita. Of
Sure,
course,
sure. Specifically with Vitamin, I don't think his sound is big. If we're talking about big versus small.
Oh, no.
Bump. Bump.
I don't know.
Bump.
Bigness to me.
It's different. Like it is very much rooted in a West Coast sound.
Anything in message.
Well, no.
weight.
Actually, the production that I've heard, with Chocolate's last record, which he produced, it was pretty full. I mean, it was rich.
I got to give you that. To me, that's different. I'm talking more so about stuff that he did for like Encore.
Well, yeah, but
like on the Layover or something
D
like
Black's last record, that heavy. I mean, there was some real rocking.
I should be clear that I'm not trying to discredit Vitamin.
No, I'm not saying discrediting.
Vita's one of my favorite producers.
No, it's not a matter of discrediting. I'm just saying we're just deciding
big versus small sound.
And I think Vita. If I was going to go for small sound, I would. There's other producers that I think really do that well. This is not to say that a producer's bad or good. whether they're doing a big sound or a minimal sound. I mean, that's neither here nor there. I mean, you can do a big sound and be horrible. In fact, scare everybody away, right? I mean, either way of the question. But my question is, well, what kind of sound is Vita's sound? That's all. That's all.
Did Vita weigh in on this?
Vita's still sleeping, I think. But a lot of people have. I got Grinch is writing in saying, hey, what's up?
Say hi.
We'll say hello to Grinch. Where are you, buddy? Nice one. Interesting, go back to the territorial comment that you made. The net has made hip-hop less territorial, comes from Andrew Mattson.
I agree. I agree with him.
And as an example, he talks about Drake, the biggest star being
from Canada.
He's got Houston, Atlanta, Vegas, all kind of stirred up together. I mean that,
Mattson's talking more so about Drake's style, like his sound.
He's from. He said specifically, Drake says, I disagree. The Nets made hip hop less territorial. Biggest star is Drake, and he's from Houston, Atlanta, Vegas. All one word.
Oh, I thought Drake was from Canada.
And let's throw in Vancouver. Houston, Vancouver, Atlanta, Vegas.
You can also say, what's his, Henry Osborne's new project with the DJ from Chicago. I mean, people are just mixing things up right now.
Right.
Well, just to Mattson's point really quick, I don't think the internet has made hip-hop as a culture or as a form of music any less territorial. You're really just able to rep your turf globally now, much more easily. Like, the internet hasn't made people stop caring about where the music comes from. And I'm not saying this is across the board for hip-hop fans, for people who pay attention to rap music. We have to take into account the fact that we're talking about different generations of people who've listened to hip-hop. I'm approaching 40 years old now. You know, so I started listening to rap music when 84, 85, 86, right? Early Fat Boy stuff and old Run DMC and some stuff like that. Nice. He got one. Nah, he was close enough. He was close enough. We got to give him that. So for people my age, I think for people, and again, this is not a blanket statement, but I can speak for a whole lot of people when I say we still very much care where the music comes from. You know, what conditions are you coming out of? What inspires you to rap about what you rap about? And so, yeah, maybe a younger generation, and also we're not big fans of Drake either. You see what I mean? Drake's biggest support group, I think, are much younger kids who might identify with the third wave of rap, or people who are common market fans as opposed to, like, you know, us as artists. I don't know if I've made a very clear point. All I wanted to say was I think the internet has not cheapened the significance of where music is created. There's still a large amount of people who care about that stuff.
Yes. By the way, my point was Dark Time Sunshine. That was the band.
Yeah,
that I had in my mind.
Henry's project.
Henry's project, but that project is really, you know, it's a melding of two different formats.
They're touring. You know, that's important. When you can do a successful tour, when you can get your music out on the road, that stuff is really important still, especially at an indie level.
Go bigger. MIA.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I hate her. You know, I really do, and I tell you why. First of all, I've never been a super fan of her music to begin with, but right now,
not even Galang Galang. That
early Galang Galang, I thought it was okay.
Okay,
I thought it was okay.
At least you thought it was okay. You didn't hate it then.
No, I didn't. No, and right now, so it got from okay to worse, is what her trajectory is at the moment, and how do I put this?
I think you've already passed the point of being delicate.
Yes,
you already said you hated it. Now what are you worried about saying?
The contradictions that even consume the music. So there isn't any music anymore. It's just
MA is watching right now for sure.
Is she? Oh yeah. Well, tell her to tweet her about it and say put my phone number on Twitter as well. Another stranger reporter. His number is 206.
She issued a statement about Lady Gaga.
Another
issuing statement.
Yeah.
I'm gonna rip through a bunch of things on this on my little my iPad here. Props to Scion Raw for his race awareness. But how do we take this discussion beyond the black and white. So I'd like you to comment on it, but I'm going to massively limit what you can say.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sure.
It's very important to acknowledge race, and that it does have an effect on so many different things. But in this hip-hop context of our discussion, race is still very much important in hip-hop, and we have to acknowledge that.
How do we take it past the binary?
Do we want to? Is it important that we do? I mean, at what point do we say we are past race without it being conjecture?
Good point.
And I also want to say I've not done a very good job of acknowledging my whiteness in the way that we talked about Macklemore. I mean, Macklemore writes a song called White Privilege, and people identify with it. People get it because it's out there. Like me identifying with my whiteness, my masculinity, it really is in a much more subtle way. And I've chosen to do that. But again, acknowledgement is the very first step. We have to acknowledge it.
And it's so strange, the recent controversy in my life. A lot of people don't know this, but I almost do not identify with my blackness. And this is a bizarre thing to say, because when you're in Africa, you can't see it. It doesn't exist, right? It's the strangest thing to do, because when you're used to it, it becomes
part of the fabric, right?
Well, it's just it's just
blackness is ubiquitous.
It's not there. I mean, in fact, you don't even. I mean, it just leaves your mind. The moment it leaves your mind, and you're used to it not being there for a long time, then you actually.
White people are the same way.
Yes, of course.
They spend most of their time surrounded by white folks, right? And so they forget about their whiteness.
Yeah.
And that's a problem when they have to interact with other cultures. It becomes an issue when they can't apply the sensitivity that's required to relate to issues of race.
Yeah.
And so they revert to this default mechanism of saying, oh, it's always about race. Charles, you're always playing the race card. When in fact you never identified, and I'm speaking now specifically about one issue, but with that issue, you never specifically said, the teacher is a racist. That wasn't your statement. The statement was, the teacher failed to realize that there are racial implications. There are race matters that apply to these circumstances, right?
Yes.
And it's about awareness. It's about sensitivity. It's not about being racist.
Charles is about to jump out of his skin.
I agree. No, it's totally, a lot of people, you just brought up a big point. The word we use in Africa is Europeans. No one actually uses white. You say European.
Muzungu.
Yeah.
Muzungu is kind of the blanket statement for whites, and it does mean foreigner.
Yes, it does. That's actually, that's a very important point. And a lot of people don't see this. But to get to my thing is, in Zimbabwe, there is the cultural sensitivity. This was another thing that I was trying to point out, was to say there is cultural sensitivity. In Zimbabwe, we have this situation between the Shonas and the Matabeles. It's a long historical thing and involves almost, there's maybe Europeans came in the middle of the 19th century there, but for the most part, color is not the issue here. But it's as profound and as difficult as a racial situation.
Yeah.
And you have to be sensitive to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is what it is. Weirdly
you can't just go and say, it doesn't matter that you're Shona.
Yes, you're right.
No,
you
it
get
does
the point.
matter.
It does matter.
It does matter.
And it does matter in what context, because lots of people died.
You can tell me all you want, like you don't see race. Like me, I don't see color.
I do agree with this point, but yeah. That's all.
All right, no, that's good. I'm gonna keep on this little short. Like I want a little bursts from each of you guys.
We need a buzzer.
Toronto hip hop, Rich Kid, Tona, Theology.
Oh my goodness, man, the world is just blowing up. I lost track of Toronto with
Maestro Fresh West.
No, even that? Chuck Blair.
Take it back to Maestro Fresh West. Again, growing up in Louisville, Kentucky, like we paid attention to what was going on in Toronto, and I was a huge fan of Maestro Fresh West. Drop the needle, let your backbone slide. Like that stuff was hot. Man.
Oh,
that's mid to late '80s rap.
And there's Aristotle as well. Aristotle was out of Toronto, if I'm correct. I think he was.
But then, Toronto went from that late '80s party rap into more of the conscious backpack stuff, and you get people like I think Cardinal Official. That's Toronto rap, right?
Yeah. All right, Toronto's dead.
Oh, let me just finish with Cardinal Official then. All I want to say is Cardinal Official. You take that back to like quintessential backpack conscious rap, right? he represented the underground for the longest time. And now he's more so known for commercialized hits. And that's not to say he sold out. This is just a transition that's being made. Nobody paid attention to Toronto until Cardinal started rapping with like Natalie Imbruglia or whoever the hell it was.
Rick James' wife wants to know what makes you cry. What shoots you right in the heart?
Onions are the only thing that make me cry, man. That's the only time I ever cried, chopping onions.
What hits you in the heart if it doesn't make you cry?
Matters related to my daughter. Being a father, I think, is what motivates so much of my being, so many of my decisions, and I am constantly terrified that I'm making wrong decisions. And so sometimes, yeah, I lose sleep over the fact that I've gone wrong as a parent. That affects me pretty deeply. I won't get into the whole crying thing. I cannot remember the last time I cried. And that's not to say that as a
No, man, I think it was more the heart, like emotionally connected.
But I talk about this whole idea of crying. Like I feel like I've been disconnected from so many of my emotions since living in Seattle. I talked a little bit about conditioning and about how this place really can affect the person that you become. Mm-hmm. I think I have become very cold and callous since living in Seattle.
Wow.
How does hip hop kind of play into or parse into more visual mediums like photography, like filmmaking?
Man, that
As a
that
filmmaker,
ship has
I want to hear
sailed.
from you on this.
That ship has really sailed, and I'm talking on a commercial level. When I think back to like the late '90s, mid to late '90s, when companies like Coca-Cola were using underground rap to promote things like Sprite. Like the first time I ever saw Grand Puba rap in a Sprite commercial, and then they had Pete Rock and CL Smooth promoting Sprite.
Oh, KRS-One, my friend.
KRS-One, in the ring.
In the ring.
In the ring. Like, I mean, this was important. This stuff was really important. Then, towards the late 90s, when we had the development of that Jiggy era rap, it just became not so much more about promoting a product, but about selling 1 million records. I mean, it really became about making all the money that you could make.
So is hip-hop music contingent on the visual media to sell records? I mean, as a filmmaker and a photographer, this is an interesting point for me, and it's very interesting to Sergio here, who's written it a couple times now. It's when I perceive and when I feel hip-hop music, and when I feel it visually, as in it lands on my senses, there's a thickness, a depth to that presentation that has a profound effect on me. And is that what makes people buy records? I mean, a lot of the audience there are visual artists, and this is a loaded gun. So what? I mean, you're a filmmaker, Charles.
Well, to begin with, hip-hop sort of grows up at a time when visual images are more and more accessible. The production of imagery, right? Production of video becomes, I mean, it's almost, Yo MTV Raps is, you can't separate that with like modern era hip-hop. It's crazy. And all of that was about, that was very territorial, I have to admit, because you got to see, the
Bronx.
The Bronx.
Yeah.
You got to
Live
see.
interviews
You
in the
got.
Bronx.
You got. You got
Video
to
shot in
see.
the Bronx.
If it was in Houston, it would be the Ghetto Boys. You'd see what that was like, and it was a way. It was a kind of a.
There was a cross street sign in every video, right?
Oh yeah.
Like there was that pan out shot of the
It
cross
goes
street.
back to
sign.
location and where you're
I'm
from.
telling you,
very
yeah,
much.
But
Very important.
But right now, I mean, it's so there's this early marriage between the video form and hip hop, and today, I mean, even the current situation in Seattle is that a guy like Zia made an imprint. It definitely helped shape the image language of that for me at least of the scene.
One additional point, it further illustrates the importance of race in hip hop and class in hip hop. People want to know what the person looks like that they're listening to. Does that make sense? And I think that's the importance of the visual element that accompanies the music, right? Take Yellow Wolf, for example. Are you familiar with this rapper Yellow Wolf? You hear him and right away you can identify the fact he's a white rapper because he's got that intonation. You could just tell he's a white rapper, right? But it's not until you start to watch the videos. I mean, sure, he's conveying a message through the music, and the more you listen, the more you identify. But it's not until you watch the video that you start to decide whether you like this guy or whether you don't like this guy.
That was the point.
That stuff.
There's
so
definitely
important.
some gravity there that I think is interesting. As a visual artist,
it's
myself.
beyond some gravity. And when I said earlier that that ship had sailed, what I was talking about was the commercialization of it.
Sure.
Like, how important is it to use the music to sell a product visually? No, but the visual component of hip hop culture is still so important.
You know,
very
it's so
important.
strange, and also it comes out of the music. As a filmmaker, and you know, this is how I work. I don't make films in the way I write. I make films literally by thinking about images. What image do you catch?
Yeah.
Right?
What needs to be seen.
And yeah, and how do you build around this image? I always say find this one image and then work your way around it in terms of like how you're going to shoot it, how you're going to get to it.
Right.
But I always say
What's
when you
the
look at a
access
film,
to the image?
yeah, that it has to be.
Yeah.
You know, I think all great. This is now talking about imagery and cinema. And so I remember I was Black Stacks has a new record called Talking Buildings. Just released a couple of weeks ago, and there, in that record there was a song called Like These, and the image was of an airplane landing in slow motion, and it's weird enough, that's all it was, that's all I needed to see. And I'd say if I was to shoot anything, that's what I would aim at and depart from, right? And so whenever I hear music, one thing I liked when Zia worked with you guys with the wonderful collection of videos you did during the snowstorm here in Seattle.
Yeah, I love that.
Which was just, it was a great way. The music and the snow, and everybody knew that it was a really difficult moment, and you guys took advantage of it and placed a sort of like a stamp on what everybody was suffering because you couldn't move in the city. When it snows, you're stuck. Instead of that, you went out and you made beautiful videos with beautiful music. And to me, this is, again, and what I caught in that video was actually the way you were cleaning the car window, getting rid of the snow. And weird enough, you always want that image that gets you right there, and then you move away from it and you move towards it. And that's how I've always, in the two films I've made, every sequence is looking for literally the one that communicates everything.
That's the academic in him talking.
Of course.
He sees this abstract imagery,
But so do I,
and it's
unfortunately.
valuable. No, yeah, of course, because that's
the core of what
that's
I
where you come from.
Bring the
Right,
thing that's
right.
in here
Yes.
and make it into a little bit of reality.
For the average consumer, what they want to know is, what does that guy look like?
Yeah.
What is he, what is he wearing?
A lot of people.
What is he
you know,
wearing? That's extremely important. As
The light
fashion.
over here is someone who's writing, and she talks a lot about that. She's the only white girl in a black village right now. She's talking a lot about being seen and the lever that pulls for someone. I think the visual aspect does, in some ways, pulls what you're talking about within the culture of hip hop. When, as filmmakers and visual artists, it's about taking this fuzzy idea, and there is an image that represents it. What is that image, and how do you get access to it? Speaking of visual images, I would love to give the folks at home a treat. We've been going for just over an hour and 45 minutes now. I'd like to get some of your music in front of these people. I'd like to take a little break. It may take us 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes to set up, but I'd love for you to stay tuned here because in just a moment, Ra will be performing some of his new stuff from his Victor Shade project. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So bear with us. What we're going to do is hear from Ra. We're going to come back and we'll take some more questions after a couple tracks. So bear with us as we push back our chairs and slide away our table and hear from Ra. And Ra, just make sure you're under the light, man, because that's the only way people can see you.
We're mobile.
We've got you.
I want to sneak out. Yeah, I get it now. Good God, we talked for an hour and 45 minutes. Just like a yapping away.
Are we ready to test the mic? 1, 2. Test. 1, 2. Check. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Does that sound all right to you? All right, here comes a little bit of music. We'll call this like a mic check. Okay? Yeah. Listen, pop bottles, we celebrate the day I born. Spitfire parade, I play them triumph horns. We commemorating the victory. Strong arm wrongdoers, truest agree. Long overdue was his delivery. Doc raised him, not a mama to marvel at him. Ain't no matter, got a mapping him with the drawn pattern. Format to follow one, I wonder what happened when you combat him. Go on, ask him all, action long lasting. Fall back and gather your thoughts up. So super cooped in the Porsche with the door shut. Herb spotter, about to start a movement towards one. Burn hotter, got the heart of a human torch, son. Made and created with the vengeance. Take prisoners and avengers in an instant. Hate them, women and men, and then make them indifferent. Pay attention, hey, you missing the display of the vision. It's him, raise your glass up high. Propose a toast to the most in disguise. And I fly in a, fly in a. Now, lift your hands and rejoice. Prayers answered, make a joyful noise. I can't hear y'all. I fly in a. I fly in like, Are we good on the sound? All right, we're gonna keep it moving. Get it. Now, evil in the shadows lurks perfectly still. Wait to slay the guards. You know how to move with them shades off. Class act back in the day. Job to cover basics. Aced it with the keenest sense. No way to lace it. Star pupil, bright as his irises. No way to face it. Look away, kid, and try to hide your hatred. Major placement here to govern this rock. Obey the science of bodega politics. Make a metropolis. I'm suited up to beat the block down. Out to get it in. Jump on my jump off. Penning pros and contradictions in my duality. Balance the universe. Two imperfect entities symbiotically doing work, pursuing perpetrators who murder for purple haze. A faithful servant of the circle to fame, serpent invades. Daily I've been called to defend, naturally walk with a limp, still actually standing taller than them. Slightly prideful, why pull the wool over their eyes when they fully brown to start with? Chickens come to roost, wolves harvest. The heartless are oftentimes the smartest, oscillating the yard, operating for profits. Game recognize them in sheep suits and ties, apply bleach to them MV suits you bleed through. People do the stupidest things, that's why they need a few leaders in the wings like me, secretly keeping each and every one of them in the fold. Suppose I lost one. Fought with the dark forces, throwing caution to the wind. Dark force for the wind, but the problem start when I feel emotion, that's a hard one. Origin of my type, solitary confined, right? Only time you find me in limelights to fight crime. Resign to spend my nights working the streets. Any human concern or ruin my purpose, leave it defeated now. Evil in the shadows lurks, perfectly still, wait to slaughter me. Laughter, you don't match against my armory. Click, click, masterful sharpshooter, you move an 8-inch off target. I done marked it in anticipation. Cool handler, hot as this hammer is, I'm radiation. Call the cops off, I got the spot laced in. New station, Duke Bagan disguise. Realize the value of bodega politics, remain anonymous, yeah. I'll do one more for you, then I think we're gonna come back and talk a little bit more. Thank y'all for tuning in. Cheese. Paparazzi pop me with a flash from out the daffodils, for real. Tracking back to Baskerville, shaders on the case, cause they stay on minds. You'd have thought I'd go to war for what they say go online, but people's hard to please. I put them pieces of the puzzle together to show whoever, but that's whatever, cause never shall they fade me. It's all bacon gravy, them made these babies was bound to turn Johnny come lately. Y'all can hate me in the morning, but tonight I shine resplendent act. Bashful with the bitches in the spot, bask in it, top and back spin it, easily leave the lid in it. Cut the bullshit premise, I know your kids rented. Cause ain't no novice got knowledge enough to hold the telephoto. Steal the soul, could spill a soul on a roll. So I pose, I suppose, fit my image on your negative. Shutterbug, I'm clicking at your neck again. Speckled in the opaline string, I floss beyond gums. Lay no man with the cross, Jerry Crosby on the jump. John Weezy with the guns, Calhoun on the drums. I don't read too much, your publication going under. Funny how many bums are wannabes, a boy wonder. Fronted you 20, how you coming back with short numbers? Hunters for sport first and foremost, so don't forget that. Careful not to mix it with the riff rap. Star power, Trump muscle flex on who? Left the script flip, Vic put the X on you. See, I spray the cockroach and he encroach upon my FaceTime. Why you think they stay watching the waistline? Stick up kids nowadays out to evade paying tax on the property stake, sharpening spades, then and then dig. Meet me in the trench, bring your tools to work if you trying to make a living at this. Yeah, bring your tools to work if you trying to make a living at this. bring your tools to work. If you're trying to make a living at this, bring your tools to work. If you're trying to meet me in the trench, bring your tools to work. If you're trying to make a living at this. Chase, back to you, man.
A ton of questions are rolling in right now, and I don't know if my mic is live. Probably not. There we go.
Use mine.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. So, rather than tell me about those two particular tracks, I want to go back to the beginning. What's the first track that you birthed when you thought of this concept? Was it one of those two or something different? And if so, will you perform that? I know we just spent a good hour and a half talking about culture in general. I want to bring it back very specifically to Victor Shade, the project.
Sure. The first song that I did as a little mic check, as a warm up, the pop bottles. That was probably one of the first Victor Shade tracks, or the first song of the Victor Shade project that I wrote, and it's weird. It kind of dabbles in this braggadocio vein. You know what I mean? Like it's really like. So super cooped in the Porsche with the door. I don't have a Porsche. You know what I mean? I don't think I've ever even been in a Porsche. You know what I mean?
Right,
so it is that exploration of like rapping about things that you're completely unfamiliar with. Some materialistic
Does it
type
touch
things,
on the superhero thing? Like?
That's where it comes from.
Got it.
Like in my opinion, and again, this is based on my limited knowledge of comics and superheroes, but there has to be some sort of a certain degree of contempt that a superhero has for the general public, right? I mean, he's busy saving people who are in distress, but I mean, for God's sake, like, why don't you people get it? You know what I mean? There's got to be a certain component of that.
Sure.
I mean, they're gifted. They are above and beyond, right?
Iron Man 2.
Precisely.
No, precisely. Why didn't you guys get it?
Precisely. And so
I don't want
that
it to precipitate down to that, massive pop culture level, but we heard the beginnings and why the Victor Shade album came. There's a certain kind of braggadocio, I think was your word.
Yeah.
Give me the other side of that album, like conversationally. What's if that's one component of it? What's the other component of it?
The identity struggle. You know, like this challenge of being handed responsibility or being handed opportunity, and believe me, there are some young MCs, young aspiring rappers in Seattle who probably think like they will never have the opportunities that I've had as an MC, or they'll never attain the same level of success that Common Market has achieved in Seattle, right? And that's a hard thing for a young kid to think that there's so much separation between where they are and where we've gotten.
Right.
Because we're looking at this right here thinking, well, we'll never get to there, right? It's all about a matter of perspective.
Right.
So anyway, yes, there is a certain amount of responsibility that I've been charged with because of what we've established as Common Market, right?
Sure.
So that is the superhero, right? Okay. What are you going to do with that responsibility? Where do you go from here?
So is it a moral question that you're asking your audience in a sense as well? I mean, like where are you?
I think morality, the issue of morality pervades everything that we create, right? To a certain degree. This really is, I mean, it's created as much for fun as it is for...
I know, all this shit's so serious and heavy.
Well,
but at the end of the day...
I never shy away from that.
I know.
mean, I've always had a lot to say. I've just got to figure out creative ways to say it.
Right.
Nobody wants to be preached to, right? And so the idea of like, rapping from a soapbox, you got to get away from that. Like, how are you going to connect with the people? Right. And that's the whole idea behind Victor Shade. Okay, fine. I'm not the vision.
Right.
I'm not extraordinarily gifted and talented. I'm not put in a position of privilege. I'm not up here and unattainable. I'm right down here in the streets, observing all the stuff that's going on.
In many ways, that's a lot about what Chase Jarvis Live is about for me, is to be able to
accessibility.
Accessibility, be able to shine the spotlight on some of my friends and tell a broader story than just the mouthpiece of photography and industry and artist and creative. It's like I draw a ton of inspiration from you and other friends like you, and bringing folks like yourself, Charles. Yesterday I had Zach Arias, who's a photographer. The whole range to the table to have a discussion is something.
You guys got an impressive beard too.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys might want to have an arm wrestle.
Man,
but
talk about superhero.
You know, there's an interesting, not to get too philosophical, I was liking where it was going light, but from the philosophical side, a moral judgment is very much like an aesthetic judgment. There's, you can talk about goods and bads and rights and wrongs, and I think what you're doing is right. I think what you're doing is good from an aesthetic standpoint.
That's about as much validation as I need.
No, man, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Have you got a couple of the tracks you can drop for us?
Sure, yeah.
I think we'll listen to that. We'll come back for a wrap up. I'll take a few more questions. Last chance to, I don't know what camera is live right now, but I'll ask questions to of the audience at hashtag CJ Live, and then we'll roll your cart back out, bring the table out, and finish up.
Cool.
Have some fun with this one. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Listen, get it. They say gamers could be sold, not told. Who told them that shit? How the hell else I'm going past it? Gather around the ashes. Fire been burnt out for years. Make it easier for you to see the light when it appears. Cast shadows on the halls of architectural displays of masculinity. Overstand that times infinity, or simply put, bait get lanced by the hook. Greatest chance I ever took was taking answers out the book. Sign a deal for distribution, I'm at odds with the publisher. Either with no handicap and par with the numbers. I par with a bunch of rubbish, walk through a couple jungles and part upon up and comers what they wanna take from us. We band brothers together with phantom power to serve, delivered to every prisoner. Freedom he deserved, deep seated in the rivalry. Deep feet wasn't optional. Deep sea diver discovered 3 feet of a gospel in a pothole. Shitty condition of city streets. That's the reason that I cape up, hate scuff sneaks. Freakazoids move around with no regard for the law. When they get wound tight, crown slides slightly down and to the right. All hail frozen, that precipitation rain. Ready, willing, and able, though part of me favors Cain. Heard them sabers battling after the last bell rang. Now you trying to hear the rest? I guess you stand. 100 spoke, 100 more spoke after them. Holding court in the woods, cracked in. Talking about back then, we were royalty, lineage of princes. That's before the game beat them senseless. Everything you charge, draw interest. Basics of economy. We trying to find a way to live responsibly. Got them to the brook and tell them, look at your reflection on the surface. Break the plane and stop complaining the thirst and get yours. Yours, yours, yours. Tell them get. Now get yours. Yours, yours, yours. Tell them get. Now get yours. Yours, yours, yours. Tell them get. Now get yours. Yours, yours, yours. Tell them get. Now get yours. Oh, sorry about that. I'm not much of a DJ. I prefer to rap. I'm gonna end it on this though. Dig it. Probably never will once I serve you. Impression indelible, 7 ethical virtues. Stepping on a second lesson, left them with the nerve to use courage to question experts I defer to. Reveling benevolence, the essence of the third you. Should've sought permission for extension of your curfew. What I mean is when I intervene, it's for a purpose. You could curse it, but I heard you saying etched in the annals of the town hall. Hero to the people, Popo Chief for calling outlaw. Streaker through the streets, squallery, go rotten foul. For I squeeze a bit of bleach and antiseptic in your mouth, Paul. Talk sweeter, you can see the need for alcohol. Sterilize your speech, doc prescribe a vial of Tylenol. Powerful enough to knock it out the ring. I swing a heavy southpaw, Hall of Famer. Yeah, call it whenever you fall and use it whenever you lose and invoke it when spoken. I get dressed. Poo-poo that Gucci and Louis. Got different kind of designer, unrivaled the focus of these specs. Color coordinated, remind him of supersonics. He definitely represent the S. Cleaning his knee, bring it the king in the guillotine. It's twin choppers popping out the vest, y'all. Yeah, follow me. What a fofo go for nowadays anyways? I ain't got time to shop. I gotta grind a block and mine cops, rounds to rock on top of that. It's crown to stop. I need a vacate from my day-to-day nightmares, day to day. Net cream, flavors. I just had these gators made. So cold with it, so cold. Heat 'em up, need a cup, keep your hands high. Bucket for the lamb chop, man. I love your band, I just don't dance a lot. Wrote a couple lines though, put 'em over Congos, even had that head wrap. College after, how to batch, how to back now. Love gun, watch me load it up and bust one. Ace freely kiss her with that wrist under my cummerbund. Dipping on the fundraiser, sharpening my politics. Sipping Perrier and Mayor's digs for them Jerry's kids. Giving inch, take a kilometer from the press corps. Thank you for the offer, no need for police escorts. Save your ticket tape for taking paper off the Wall Street. Bankers backs against it saying now on my job bill, if any could save the Sin City, it be Don Will. Tanya on my speed dialer, delegate with confidence. Payroll filled with show killers, spitters in my cabinet. Rip it off the hinges, a menace to make a mint, not amends. This is business intensities in my simple sentences. Sensitive to needs, proofreader, breeze blew the leader through the roof. Steeple shooting steeds through these hula hoops. Camel through a needle's eye. Take a heap of patience, save the prayer for creation. Meet the maker. He is I, water walker, floater fly, notify the Baroness. Blast off, hope he was planning on sharing airspace. Hail Mary, could you spare a little grace? It's a hell of a life to waste. The heir to greatness is inherent in his. This second step and check and go with gold chains hanging, singing. And we done.
Woo.
Thank you, Chase.
Wow. That was stunning, man. Thank you so much. So
I even worked up a little sweat over here.
yeah, you get a little sweat. Make sure my mic is on. I don't know, Charlie, if you've raised my mic levels, we should be good. Let's push this card out of here if we can, guys. And Norton, would you help me set up just for a second? I want to put the table back in and talk at you all for another 2 minutes while we kind of wave farewell and a couple of wrap-up questions. Yeah, we want to make sure. Good. All right. We're pretty do-it-yourself here, rolling our own tables around. That's where I like to keep it.
Can we play this in the background? Will that work?
Sure. Yeah, I think if my sound guy has a heart attack, we'll hear from him.
It might be too much. We can adjust it as necessary. I
All
want
right.
to play some of these new MTK beats for you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. Are we okay with that, Charles?
Sure.
Sure, says the sound man. That's great. Well, before I go on internet land, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Seriously, congratulations. There's moving music, and I forgot to tell you that the first time I saw you perform that was very intense for me because we've been talking about this project for a little bit before I had seen you actually perform. We started talking about a year ago, if I'm not mistaken, about doing something interesting and different. If this forum is interesting to you, folks at home, let me know about it. Let us know. You're at Mudede, right, on Twitter?
Yeah, that's what I am. Yeah.
Charles.
Mudede, M-U-D-E-D-E. And now you know how to say it. A lot
Mudede.
of people don't. It's Mudede.
Mudede.
Yeah.
See, we've been friends for years. I'll say Mudede tomorrow, but Mudede. And then you're at RA Scion.
RA Scion, R-A-S-C-I-O-N.
Got it.
I'm hoping to break 1,000 followers as a result of this thing.
Well, if you haven't
It's
already,
been somewhat of a glass ceiling for me.
if you haven't already subscribed to follow along on Ra's Twitter feed, please do at R-A-S-C-I-O-N. I'm at Chase Jarvis, A-T. No, I'm not going to spell the word at. I'm at Chase Jarvis, but I want to know if you like this stuff. This is, again, the background here is that I wanted to bring people on this little platform who have inspired me and who drive more of the artist in me, from pictures to visual artists to musical artists to writers, filmmakers like yourself. And I'm looking for tons of feedback, so do send it along. Since you've performed, I'm going to go back to the phones, as they say, and just pull a couple more questions because it seemed there's like a little rabid.
I've been impressed by the dialogue so far.
What do you think of Saul Williams?
Oh.
Somebody wants to speak.
No.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Nope. I'm gonna.
You
You
go
can't.
ahead.
You can't
No,
burst
no,
onto
no,
that.
no.
You can't burst in.
I'll say this much about the art form of spoken word poetry or slam poetry. It has this same sort of negative connotation in hip hop circles that the conscious backpack rap has gotten. So I think it's very much still in the same group, the same class of people.
Okay.
So people have stopped paying attention to it because somebody said it was corny. Somebody said it doesn't have any relevance. It's old stuff. Get with the new program, right? I think that's what happened with a lot of slam poetry, and I think that's why it doesn't have the same following now that it did in '99 and through 2003 or 2004.
Good enough. You want to bring?
Saul Williams is a fantastic artist.
I agree. I mean, he's talented. But again, I've always... Okay, I'm going to stop because I get into my whole hip-hop purist thing.
We don't have time for your whole hip hop purist thing.
And so
you got to say something about Saul Williams.
But Saul Williams, I'm not into it. That's all.
Good artists to start with. For a lot of folks are like, this is the most in-depth hip hop thing that some of the audiences come in contact with in their life.
Being Saul Williams?
No, today, right now.
We're recommending?
Yeah, I want to, and some of the folks at home want to know, like, all right, I'm sold. What? Give me a few names. Drop a few names.
Oh man, this is so hard. That's like saying which gate do you enter, to the palace.
Don't. Then if you use
Speaking
less
of palaces, I would say Shabazz Palace.
Yes.
I'm a critic. I have no problem with this question.
Shabazz Palace.
Shabazz Palace.
Yeah, grew up here
definitely
out of
right
Seattle.
now. Just now getting some national attention.
Yep.
And making, of course, I mean, everybody sort of gets their background. He Ish, who does it, has a background with Diggable Planets, but he's sort of reinvented himself. And Shabazz Palace is pretty much, I think, one of the big pulses coming out of the city.
Right. Let's talk about Beyond the City. And right here. Keep going.
Oh.
And I'm still not clear whether we're recommending something that's current or just a point of reference for somebody.
Which artist? Good starting point.
Oh, goodness.
Go back and listen to some early X-Clan. Like, without a doubt, like, I think that, that represents such a significant point in time with the development of hip-hop culture. And if you can't really identify with the music and the message of X-Clan, you're going to have a really hard time understanding the context of this whole discussion about hip-hop today.
Good. Where's your album available?
Online. And you
digital
can find
only, right?
Digital only.
Love that. That's amazing. And iTunes?
Yeah, all of the major online retailers.
Amazon, or from your website there, which is rascion.com, RASCION.com.
I would say also just read on the web, and there's, I mean, I'm going to make a plug. I like Andrew Matson at the Seattle Times, and I think what he's listening to, I even keep up with it. And I also, because he writes for my paper, guys like Larry Mizell. I mean, they're local in some sorts, but it's just keeping your ears open on the, your eyes open on what's going on in the web and what all the buzz is and all that stuff,
It certainly is the Wild West, and this show is very much part of the Wild West. So tell us what we did poorly, tell us what we did well. There's been a lot of requests for more of this, and I promise to deliver it.
Yeah, just don't say things like, less hip-hop, please. This is not a hip-hop discussion. Again, I think it bears repeating. This is just the framework of our discussion today. Yeah,
it's very, very culture-oriented, and
you don't have to be into hip-hop and rap music to understand what it is that we're talking about today. And I dare to say that your next segment will actually touch on some of the very things that we're touching on right now, just in a completely different context.
From an architect's perspective, or a designer, or an inventor. And anything else you guys would like to add? Because I want to say farewell, unless you want to throw something.
No, I'm thank you very much.
This
is first of all
film to plug.
No, I was going to plug. I can't plug my films.
If you, I will. If you don't.
Yeah, if you can, but I
just plug them, Charles. Just plug them.
I've made two films. One is called Police Beat, and that's available on Netflix. You can just download it. I think it's actually for free even right now. And then there's one called Zoo, which is not for free, for a good reason. And, you can go check that too. I met him with Rob DeVore. We're partners, we're filmmakers, and we're working on a project right now. I also just want to really thank, everybody, all over, really all over the, I'm sorry I have a global perspective, but anybody who's doing hip hop in the world who's giving me pleasure, I want to thank them. Really honest, that's how I feel about it. And locally, I just want to thank, everybody who's really made the scene so exciting at this moment. And I want to thank, Ra for inviting me today. It was him. It was his idea, and I want to thank him for being so, thinking about what can you do to make things come together. This is what's happening at the moment. That's my last thing. And that's all.
What about you, buddy?
Oh, and 1040, Roger. You're always on my mind. I love your stuff. Love it. You're one of the best producers out there.
What about you?
Just a message of thanks as well. Thank the both of you for participating. When I approached you with this idea, I had very little in mind in terms of how it would unfold or what we would accomplish. But you're right. I wanted to do something different. We even talked about the idea of making a music video out of this sort of thing.
Right.
What we're trying to do is reach people through this medium.
Maybe I'll have my good friend Mike Realm remix this thing. Mike's an amazing DJ out of the Bay Area. Apparently hip hop's not so dead.
You've just lost your relationship to the Bay Area.
No.
Nobody in the Bay Area is doing anything for you now. But again, neither of you had to commit to this sort of thing. I mean, you're both busy people, and this takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort to make this thing happen. But we do it because we do want to make people aware that we're doing things here, and we really are just sharing a very small portion of what's happening here in our world with the rest of this world. And we are connected. We are so very much connected.
The world is a very connected place. I want to thank all of my team for pulling this together. It's no small feat. It seems like you just got three of us sitting around a little white table here, but in reality, a lot's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, let's pull the curtain and reveal.
Yeah, if we pulled the curtain, you'd see a bunch of people really working hard to help make this possible. So thank all you guys on the cameras and running cables and over on the soundboard, and our technical director, D'Artagnan, for mixing this thing up. It looked beautiful, a couple of snippets that I saw. So I'm sure we made plenty of mistakes, but without further ado, I want to sign off and say thank you very much, and stay tuned. You guys know where to find all of us online, and hope we bump into you in the real world sometime.
Peace.
Peace, as they say.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Very much so.